The room went silent when Vanessa Carlyle lifted the crystal glass in her hand and smiled at the maid like she had just found entertainment for the evening. $7,000, Vanessa said, her voice sweet enough to sound harmless and sharp enough to cut skin. That's what I'll give you if you dance for us. 40 guests turned toward Elena Morales. She stood near the French doors with a silver tray in her hands, wearing a pressed black uniform, her dark hair pinned low at the back of her neck. For a moment she thought she had misheard. But then Vanessa laughed and a few of her friends laughed with her. Not because anything was funny, because people like Vanessa had trained rooms to follow her lead. Elena's fingers tightened around the tray. Adrian Whitmore was not there yet. And that was exactly why Vanessa had chosen that moment. The Whitmore estate sat on 12 acres outside Greenwich, Connecticut, surrounded by iron gates, sculpted hedges, and old maple trees that turned gold every October. It was the kind of house that looked less built than inherited from another century. White stone walls, tall windows, a marble foyer, and chandeliers that made every room feel like it belonged in a museum. Elena had worked there for 8 months. She knew which floorboard creaked outside the West Library. She knew Mrs. Whitmore liked her tea with lemon but no sugar. She knew Adrian took his coffee black and rarely finished it because some phone call always pulled him away. She knew the house became loud whenever Vanessa visited, and colder somehow, even with every fireplace lit. That night, the estate was hosting a private engagement celebration. Vanessa had insisted it be intimate, which apparently meant 40 wealthy people, a string quartet, imported champagne, and photographers pretending not to photograph anyone too directly. Elena had spent the day polishing glassware, arranging ivory roses, and helping the catering staff move through the house without being noticed. That was the strange rule of homes like the Whitmore estate. The help had to be everywhere and invisible at the same time. But Elena had learned invisibility long before she ever entered that house. She grew up in San Antonio, Texas, in a small apartment above her mother's laundromat. Music had always lived there. Her father used to play old records on Sunday mornings, while her mother danced barefoot between baskets of folded sheets. By 7, Elena was copying the steps. By 12, she was training seriously. By 18, she had won her first national ballroom competition. For a while, people said her name with expectation. Elena Morales, the girl who moved like she had been born hearing music no one else could hear. Then her father got sick. Medical bills came first. Dreams came second. Then dreams disappeared completely. Elena sold her costumes, left dance school and took every job she could. Hotel housekeeping, restaurant shifts, private cleaning. Anything that kept her mother from losing the laundromat and kept her father's medication paid for until the very end. After he passed, she stopped dancing. Not because she stopped loving it. Because sometimes love hurts more when you can't afford to keep it. The Whitmore job paid well. Better than most. Mrs. Whitmore had hired her personally after watching Elena calm down a crying flower girl at a charity luncheon. "You have patience," Margaret Whitmore had said. "That is rare." Vanessa Carlyle had never seen patience as a virtue. She saw it as weakness. From the first week, Vanessa treated Elena like furniture with hands. "Elena, is it?" she had asked once, even though Elena had been serving her coffee for 3 months. "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa had smiled. Cute. Very vintage. Adrian had looked up from his phone then. "Her name is Elena." Vanessa laughed it off, touching his arm. "That's what I said." But Elena remembered the way Adrian's eyes had stayed on Vanessa for a beat longer than usual, as if he had noticed something he didn't like. Adrian Whitmore noticed more than people realized. He was not loud like most rich men Elena had worked around. He didn't perform his power. He didn't need to. People adjusted when he entered a room. Conversations straightened. Postures improved. Even Vanessa softened her voice around him, though Elena suspected that softness was not the same thing as kindness. Adrian was polite to everyone. Not fake polite. Not camera polite. Real polite. He said thank you to drivers. He carried his own coat if no one reached for it. Once, when Elena had dropped a stack of folded linens in the hallway, he had crouched down and helped her pick them up before she could protest. "You don't have to do that, Mr. Whitmore," she had said. "I know," he replied. "That's why it counts." She had thought about that sentence for days. But kindness from someone like Adrian was dangerous if you let yourself look at it too closely. Elena had built her life on knowing her place. Not because she believed she was less than anyone. Because the world punished people like her when they forgot how quickly respect could be taken away. So she kept her head down. Until Vanessa made that impossible. The engagement party had started beautifully. Golden light poured through the windows as guests arrived in tailored suits and silk dresses. The quartet played near the grand staircase. Waiters moved with champagne. Margaret Whitmore floated through the room with quiet elegance, greeting guests with the same warmth whether they owned half of Manhattan or simply played golf with someone who did. Vanessa wore a silver gown that clung to her like poured moonlight. Her blonde hair fell in glossy waves over one shoulder, and the diamond on her finger flashed every time she lifted her glass. She looked perfect. That was the problem with Vanessa. She was always arranging herself to be looked at. Adrian had been called away earlier that evening for an emergency meeting in the city. According to Vanessa, he would return before dinner. According to the tightness around Margaret's mouth, that detail had irritated her more than she wanted to admit. "He works too much," Vanessa announced to a group near the fireplace. "But I suppose that's what happens when you're building an empire." One of her friends laughed. "And marrying one." Vanessa smiled like the joke pleased her because it was true. Elena was passing with champagne when she felt Vanessa's eyes land on her. It happened slowly, like weather changing. Vanessa tilted her head. "Elena." Elena stopped. "Yes, Miss Carlyle? I need another drink." Elena glanced at the nearly full glass in Vanessa's hand. "Of course." As she reached for it, Vanessa shifted suddenly, and champagne spilled down the front of Elena's uniform. A cold stripe soaked through the fabric. Several guests gasped softly. Vanessa's lips parted in mock concern. "Oh no. You should be more careful." Elena looked at the glass. Then at Vanessa. For one dangerous second the old Elena, the dancer, the daughter of proud people, the girl who had once stood under stage lights and bowed to applause, rose up inside her. But she swallowed it. "I apologize," Elena said. Margaret Whitmore saw everything from across the room. Her expression hardened. Vanessa saw Margaret watching too, and that seemed to annoy her. "Actually," Vanessa said louder, turning toward the guests, "I just remembered something." Her friends leaned in, hungry for whatever came next. Vanessa's eyes sparkled. "I heard from one of the staff that Elena used to dance." Elena's stomach dropped. She had told one person in the kitchen weeks ago. A harmless comment while helping move chairs after dinner. She had not expected it to travel. But in houses full of secrets, even small truths had legs. Vanessa looked her up and down. "Is that true?" Elena kept her voice calm. "A long time ago." "Oh, don't be modest." Vanessa turned to the room. Apparently, she was quite the performer. A man near the piano chuckled. "What kind of dancing?" "Ballroom," Vanessa said, with the same tone someone might use for a children's magic trick. "Can you imagine?" Heat rose behind Elena's eyes, but she refused to blink too fast. Margaret stepped forward. "Vanessa, that's enough." But Vanessa had already decided the room belonged to her. "Oh, Margaret, I'm just having fun." She reached into her glittering clutch and pulled out a checkbook. "In fact, I'll make it generous." The room quieted. Vanessa uncapped a pen slowly. $7,000, she said. "If Elena dances for us right now." A ripple moved through the guests. Some laughed. Some looked away. A few seemed uncomfortable but not uncomfortable enough to speak. That was how cruelty survived in beautiful rooms. Not because everyone approved. Because too many people stayed silent. Elena stood frozen with champagne drying against her uniform. $7,000. That was more than 3 months of her mother's rent for the laundromat space. It was enough to cover the repair bill on the industrial dryer that had been making a grinding sound for weeks. It was enough to breathe. And Vanessa knew it. Of course she knew it. People like Vanessa always found the bruise before pressing. Elena's voice came out low. "I'm working, Miss Carlyle." Vanessa smiled. "And I'm offering you a bonus." A few guests laughed again. Margaret's voice sharpened. "Vanessa." But Vanessa ignored her. "Unless you're embarrassed." Elena said nothing. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate. while still letting everyone hear. Or maybe the stories were exaggerated. The words landed harder than they should have. Because Elena had spent years telling herself that part of her life was over. That she didn't need applause. That she didn't miss the music, the floor, the breathless second before a turn. But she did miss it. She missed who she had been before grief made her practical. Vanessa held up the check. $7,000, Elena. One dance. Unless, of course, you only know how to clean floors, not move across them. The silence that followed was unbearable. Elena looked around the room. At the women pretending to adjust earrings. At the men hiding smiles behind glasses. At Margaret Whitmore, whose eyes were full of anger and apology. Then Elena looked at the marble floor beneath her feet. Clean. Polished. Wide enough. A ballroom if she wanted it to be. Something inside her steadied. She set the tray down on a side table. The small sound of silver touching would seem to echo. Vanessa blinked, surprised. Elena reached behind her head and removed the pins from her hair. Dark waves fell around her shoulders. She wiped the champagne from her sleeve with a napkin, then stepped into the open space near the center of the room. Music? Elena asked. Her voice did not shake. No one moved. Then Marcus Reed, Adrian's best friend, who had been watching from near the library doors, slowly walked to the quartet. Play something with a waltz tempo, he said. The lead violinist hesitated, then nodded. Vanessa's smile faltered for half a second before returning. She thought Elena was about to embarrass herself. Elena could feel it. That expectation. That hunger. She closed her eyes as the first notes rose into the air. And suddenly she was not in the Whitmore estate. She was 12 years old in her mother's laundromat, spinning between washing machines while her father clapped the rhythm. She was 16 in borrowed shoes, dancing until her toes bled. She was 19 under competition lights, hearing her name announced over a speaker. She was every version of herself she had buried to survive. When Elena opened her eyes, the room had changed. Not physically, but in her mind it no longer belonged to Vanessa. It belonged to the music. She began slowly. One step, then another. Her posture lifted. Her arms softened. Her body found the rhythm like it had never forgotten. The black maid's uniform should have looked plain, but somehow as she moved, it became elegant. The white apron swayed like part of the choreography. Her bare emotion filled the space more powerfully than any gown could have. The laughter died first. Then the whispers. Guests who had been waiting to smirk slowly lowered their glasses. Elena turned across the marble floor, graceful and controlled, every movement precise but alive. She danced without a partner, yet somehow it felt like someone invisible was there with her. Memory, maybe. Or grief. Or the father who had once told her, Mija, when life makes you small, dance bigger. Margaret Whitmore pressed a hand to her mouth. Marcus stood very still. Vanessa's expression tightened with each passing second. Because Elena was not failing. She was becoming unforgettable. The music swelled. Elena moved faster, her steps flowing into a sequence that made one of the older guests whisper, My God! She heard it but did not react. For the first time in years she let herself feel everything. The humiliation. The exhaustion. The years of swallowing words. The ache of being underestimated by people who confused money with worth. She danced it all. And when the final note approached, Elena turned once, twice, then stopped in perfect stillness beneath the chandelier. For one heartbeat nobody breathed. Then applause broke through the room. Not polite applause. Real applause. It startled people as much as it startled Elena. Margaret clapped first. Marcus followed. Then others joined, rising from embarrassment into admiration. The sound filled the room until it shook something loose in Elena's chest. She lowered her gaze, not in shame but to gather herself. Vanessa stepped forward quickly, her face flushed. Well, she said, forcing a laugh. That was dramatic. The applause faded. Vanessa tore the check from her book and held it out between two fingers. A deal is a deal. Elena looked at the check. Then at Vanessa. For a moment, everyone waited to see whether she would take it. Elena needed that money. Badly. But something about the way Vanessa held it, like bait, like proof that even Elena's dignity could be purchased, made her stomach turn. Elena reached out. Vanessa smiled. But instead of taking the check, Elena gently folded Vanessa's fingers back around it. You keep it, Elena said quietly. You need it more than I do. A few people inhaled sharply. Vanessa's face changed. Not anger yet. Something worse. Humiliation. You forget yourself, Vanessa whispered. Elena met her eyes. No, Miss Carlyle. I think I just remembered. The room went dead silent. And then from behind them, a man's voice spoke from the entrance. So did I. Every head turned. Adrian Whitmore stood in the doorway, still in his dark overcoat from the city, his expression unreadable. His eyes moved from Elena's champagne-stained uniform to Vanessa's clenched check. Then he looked at his fiancée. What exactly did I just walk in on? The silence felt heavier than the marble beneath everyone's feet. No one answered Adrian. Vanessa forced a smile and walked toward him. Honey, you're back earlier than expected. Adrian didn't smile back. I asked a question. Vanessa laughed nervously. It was just a little party game. A party game? Adrian repeated. Marcus stepped forward. It wasn't a game. He calmly explained everything. The spilled champagne, the public challenge, the $7,000 check, and how Elena had been pressured to dance in front of every guest. With each sentence, Adrian's expression grew colder. He looked at Elena. Is that true? Elena hesitated. She had no desire to create more drama. It doesn't matter anymore, Mr. Whitmore. It matters to me. Before Elena could answer, Margaret spoke. Marcus left out one detail. Everyone turned toward her. Vanessa humiliated an employee in my home for her own amusement. The room fell silent again. Vanessa folded her arms. Oh, please. Everyone's acting like I committed a crime. No, Margaret replied calmly. You committed something worse. Vanessa frowned. You showed everyone exactly who you are. A few guests quietly placed their champagne glasses on nearby tables. Several exchanged uncomfortable glances. The atmosphere had completely changed. Adrian slowly walked toward Elena. I'm sorry. She looked surprised. You have nothing to apologize for. I hired you to work in this house, Adrian said. Not to be humiliated in it. Elena gave a small nod. I appreciate that. Vanessa couldn't stay quiet. Seriously? You're apologizing to the maid. The word maid dripped with contempt. Adrian turned toward her. No. His voice was calm. I'm apologizing to Elena. The difference wasn't lost on anyone. Vanessa's face reddened. You're embarrassing me. I think you've handled that yourself. Several guests lowered their eyes to hide their reactions. Vanessa's confidence began slipping. She had always believed Adrian would stand beside her, no matter what. Instead, he stood on the opposite side of the room. She tried another approach. I offered her $7,000. She could have walked away richer. Adrian answered immediately. You assumed her dignity had a price. Vanessa opened her mouth but found no words. Marcus quietly added. And she refused the money. That revelation surprised several guests who hadn't witnessed the final exchange. She turned it down. Someone whispered. Marcus nodded. Every dollar. The whisper spread across the ballroom. Vanessa suddenly realized something. The story was no longer about the maid. It was about her. Every person in the room was silently judging the woman who would soon become Mrs. Whitmore. Adrian looked around at the guests. I want everyone here to know something. The room became perfectly still. The Whitmore family has always believed that character matters more than status. He paused. Tonight, one person lived up to that belief. His eyes rested on Elena. And one person didn't. Vanessa felt the room slipping away from her. She grabbed Adrian's arm. Can we please discuss this privately? He gently removed her hand. No. Her heart dropped. Because you chose to make this public. For the first time that evening, fear appeared in Vanessa's eyes. She realized she was no longer controlling the narrative. And Adrian hadn't yet revealed the one truth that would change everything. He reached into his coat pocket and slowly pulled out a sealed envelope. I wasn't only delayed because of a business meeting, he said. I came back with information. He looked directly at Vanessa. And after what I witnessed tonight, I think everyone deserves to hear it. Every guest froze. Vanessa's smile disappeared completely. She knew exactly what was inside that envelope, and she prayed Adrian wouldn't open it. Vanessa's confident smile disappeared. "Adrian," she said quietly. "Not here." He looked at the envelope in his hand, then back at her. "You had no problem humiliating someone in front of 40 people." His voice remained calm. "So we'll finish this the same way." The room was silent enough to hear the crackle of the fireplace. Adrian opened the envelope and removed several documents. "I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago." Vanessa's face turned pale. Margaret closed her eyes. She had suspected something, but not this. Adrian continued. "I wasn't investigating Elena." He paused. "I was investigating my own fiancé." Whispers spread across the ballroom. Vanessa took a step forward. "You're making a mistake." "I wish I were." He held up the report. "It confirms that you secretly contacted 3 gossip outlets, feeding them stories about my family to increase your own publicity." The guests exchanged stunned looks. "It also confirms you pressured members of my staff to report private conversations inside this house." Marcus nodded. "We verified every claim." Vanessa desperately searched the room for support, but every familiar face avoided her eyes. Adrian wasn't finished. "The investigator also found emails showing that you planned to convince me to fire several longtime employees after the wedding, so you could replace them with people loyal to you." Margaret's expression hardened. "You were going to dismiss people who've served this family for decades?" Vanessa's voice trembled. I was only trying to modernize things." "No," Margaret replied. "You were trying to control everything." The room had completely turned against Vanessa. Then Adrian folded the papers and looked directly into her eyes. "There won't be a wedding." The words landed like thunder. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. "What? Our engagement is over. You can't do this." "I already did." Slowly, Adrian removed the engagement ring from his finger and placed it beside Vanessa's untouched check on the table. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. One represented love without respect. The other represented money without dignity. Neither had any value anymore. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears, not from heartbreak but from humiliation. Without another word, she grabbed her purse and hurried toward the exit. The massive front doors closed behind her. She never looked back. For several moments no one spoke. Then Adrian turned toward Elena. "I'm sorry." She smiled gently. "You've already said that." "I don't think once is enough." Elena shook her head. "The apology belongs to the person who caused the pain." Adrian nodded. "You're right." He looked around the room. "I think tonight's celebration is over." Most guests quietly thanked Margaret before leaving. Many stopped beside Elena. One after another, they apologized for staying silent. She accepted every apology with grace. Not because it erased what happened, but because bitterness had never been the person she wanted to become. An hour later, the mansion was quiet again. Elena gathered empty glasses from the ballroom. She thought the night was finally over when Adrian approached. "You shouldn't be cleaning after everything that happened." She smiled. "It's still my job." "For tonight," he replied. Then he handed her an envelope. She frowned. "I told you I don't want Vanessa's money." "It isn't hers." She opened it. Inside was a letter and a cashier's check. The amount made her catch her breath. $50,000. She looked up immediately. "I can't accept this." "Yes, you can." "For what?" "For reminding everyone in this house that character is worth more than wealth." She tried to hand it back. Adrian gently pushed it toward her again. "It's not charity." He smiled. "I called someone while driving back from New York." She looked confused. "The director of the American National Ballroom Foundation." Her eyes widened. "I told them about a dancer whose career ended because life demanded sacrifice." Elena's heart raced. "They've agreed to watch your audition." She couldn't speak. I haven't danced professionally in years." "I know. But tonight proved something." He smiled warmly. "You never lost the dancer. You only buried her." Tears rolled down Elena's cheeks. For the first time since her father's death, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of possibility. 6 months later, a packed theater rose to its feet in applause as Elena Morales completed her first professional exhibition performance in nearly a decade. Backstage, Margaret embraced her proudly. Marcus grinned from ear to ear, and Adrian watched from the front row, applauding like everyone else. Not as her employer, not as a billionaire, simply as someone who had witnessed extraordinary strength hidden beneath an ordinary uniform. Sometimes the world mistakes quiet people for weak people, until the moment they finally stop hiding who they really are. That night, Elena didn't become extraordinary. She had always been extraordinary. The world simply chose to see her at last. Word count: 845. Final life lesson: true worth is never measured by wealth, titles, or appearances. The people who try to humiliate others often reveal their own character, while those who carry themselves with dignity, even in painful moments, leave a legacy that money can never buy. Respect is earned through kindness, integrity, and courage, and in the end, those qualities outlast every fortune.